Welcome to the Unconventional Podcast. Please could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Andrew Hulbert. I am the founder of a business called Pareto, and I retired a couple of years ago, and I am here to tell the story.
Perfect. So do you want to take us back to the beginning? What was your upbringing like? All those sorts of things.
So I'm from Oxford, which means I talk okay. My accent's all right. But actually, do you know, I grew up, my family's off a council estate, but proper working class. Had my first job when I was 8. So we used to cycle around and do various different things. And I was stuffing papers in the corner shop at 12. And my mum was in Sainsbury's for 30 years. My dad was in a factory for 42 years. So I actually had a relatively normal working class upbringing, which meant I just knew the value of money. So we couldn't ever just go and buy something. We always had to earn it to be able to get things. And even my dad was a big guy in the boot sales. He used to always run boot sales on a Sunday. So I learned part of my sales patter and market trader learnings from being on boot sales and trying to sell people things. And if we ever wanted to buy some new toys, we'd have to take old ones that we had and sell them at the boot sales and then raise money and do that. So yeah, really that was sort of early life. 14, 15, I started doing some sort of stuff that normal council estate kids do. I was drinking early, smoking early, getting in fights and all that sort of stuff, which wasn't so good. But I got into sixth form. And actually, I went to a great school called Cherwell in Oxford, just down the road from where you were, as we understand. And actually, I met all my sort of middle class mates that were all wanting to go to university at the age of 16. And I managed to break away from that early life that could have led me down a certain path in terms of crime and early pregnancy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, got in with sort of like the guys that all wanted to go to York to study politics or Bristol to do philosophy and all those amazing things. And that's really when my life changed. I got into sixth form. I was in a great school in Oxford, and it gave me this ambition that I wanted to go to university and wanted to do more with my life. And that's really where it all began.
Amazing. And yeah, we were just around the corner from each other. But what do you think it was about being around these people that sort of changed your mindset into wanting to go to university?
I think when I was younger and I was sort of just taking almost each night as it came, and you didn't know what trouble you were going to get into or what was going to happen or what sort of adventures you would go on in a bad way. I think when I got into sixth form with those guys, they were much more structured. So they would go to the library and revise for exams. They would actually spend some time on the essays and things that they were doing. Whilst this all sounds good, they would go and visit universities that maybe they wanted to go to in the future. Those things all sound really basic. But when I grew up before the age of 16, I didn't really know what university was. My family had never been, no one had. So it was all like a very early new concept for me. But also I was there a little bit of rough to some degree because I was a great guy. I was really good at organising things, great at parties and really trying to organise social events for everyone to go on. I remember one of the reasons I did so badly in my A-levels was because I organised a trip for 25 lads to go to Barcelona. Yeah, I mean, the T-shirts alone were chaos. Imagine in between us times 100. But yes, so for us, I was really spending more focus on trying to be a good person and be with my friends and enjoy all of that, whereas they were spending more time in the library. Hence, they went to better universities than I did. They had structure. They had goals. Their parents had good jobs. Their parents had been to university. And it just showed me what was possible. What that meant was I went back to my mum and dad and I said, look, I want to go to university myself. They weren't wholly on board with that idea, predominantly because for 18 years I'd been messing around. I'd been focusing on drinking and girls rather than anything else and going to parties and things. And this is before WhatsApp and emails and everyone having a phone. So there's a lot of organisation that we had to do. Luckily, my mum and dad agreed that it would be the right thing for me to go. They had to sell some bonds and cash in some things to enable me to do it. So really, when I managed to get to university, it was always ever about trying to pay my mum and dad back for saying thank you for giving me the opportunity. Because without them, I couldn't have afforded to go. And yeah, it just wouldn't have happened that way.
Yeah, definitely. And so do you think you were a bit more determined to do better at university because of the almost financial stuff that your parents have put into your education?
Yeah, I think I'd seen my mum and dad work incredibly hard. So near minimum wage roles, for very, very long periods of time. My mum and dad were your classic they left school at 15, both of them, went into a job. They were going to work until they were 65-ish. And then retire and then die. And there's nothing wrong with that if people want to go down that route. But for me, I knew from about the age of 14 that wasn't going to be the route. So I think when I'd seen that everything they'd sacrificed to raise us and have me and my two sisters and basically enable me, they had to make more financial sacrifices for me to go to uni. So my mum has always been my reason, right? My mum is my why, as they say. And I always really just wanted to pay her back. Now, look, when I went into the first year of university, I did mess about. And because you have this freedom and you have access access to everything. And I was just sort of really enjoying myself in that first year and sort of coming to terms with growing up. Because when I went, I couldn't cook, I couldn't clean, I couldn't iron. I remember I used to wear all of my clothes in entirety and then wash everything in one go. And it'd be like 3 or 4 bags of like washing. So yeah, I think I had a real reason that my mum and dad had put themselves out again, as well as tolerating me when I was younger and not always making the best decisions. And yeah, I was able to go and do it. And it was a big advantage for me because I knew there was a bigger reason for me to try and do well. I also met my wife on the very first day of university as we walked into our halls of residence. We were 19 then, we're both 39 now. So having a great partner for the last 20 years has been really important as well, because having a solid rock of a partner enables an entrepreneur to go and be an entrepreneur, I think, whether that's a man or a woman. That's been really important. And it started from the literal first day of uni as I held the door open for her as we walked into our halls.
That's very sweet.
Yes.
And so from university to 27, when you started your company, what were you doing in between?
So I studied business at university, and in my second year, I was looking for like an internship over the summer, which is really good advice, by the way. For any graduates in your second year, go and do something over the summer. Don't just go and work in a pub or something, which I did various bits and pieces. I got hooked up with this small property services business, and through something called the Shell Step Scheme. So Shell, the oil company, linked up second year undergrads with SMEs. I went and did 8 weeks with them, got on really well with the commercial director. He took me out on the last day and we went to London and had drinks in London for the first time, which I'd never done, which was all very exciting. Finished my degree, got my first, and then I went back and they took me on full time. So at the age of 21, I was in this very small property services business, mainly in London. And I had almost immediately, they gave me 50 staff to look after. That was like engineers and reception team members and all that sort of stuff. Now I was 21 and I had no idea what I was doing. And a lot of people didn't love this fact that I'd just come in very young and sort of taking on operational responsibility for lots of people. So upset a few people, not through being unkind, but just because I got an opportunity that other people didn't. That business grew from about 6 million to 12 million in the 4 years that went after that. I became ops director. I looked after 250 staff and all of the major clients that we had, including the likes of Sony and all that sort of stuff, which was quite fun. And then we got bought out by a big German business called Bilfinger. And I did 2 years as a director in Bilfinger between the ages of 24 and 26-ish. And I just hated it. I'd gone from being the king of this very small castle where I could do anything I wanted to and decisions I made would be delivered operationally and whatever I was doing, to being nobody. And again, nothing wrong with working in a big business, but for me, I was aimless. I couldn't make any change. There was huge things going on much further up the chain that I had absolutely nothing to do with. And yeah, the story is true. I was with the top team and I was on the future exec scheme, etc., etc. And I'd gone out, we'd gone to Mayfair for a steak and had a few glasses of wine. And I was in the cab with the guys on the way back, the senior team. And I just had an epiphany. I'm like, I actually don't know what I'm doing here. This is not for me. Don't like the people in this cab that I'm with. I'm not learning. I can't see where the future goes. I'm 26, 27 at the time. So I'm just like, right, actually, now's your chance. And I had that moment in the cab. I went back to my wife the next day and we'd only recently had a mortgage. And I said, Heather, I'm really sorry. I'm going to go and start this business. She wasn't entirely on board with the idea originally, but we didn't have any kids or anything at the time. That's literally how it started. I gave my 3 months notice. I thought they put me on gardening leave. They made me work for 3 months. And all I did was go around and tell all the customers that I was starting a new FM business that was going to sort of change the way that the property services sector had been served within the UK and eventually into Europe and North America as well. Yeah, I gave 3 months notice, worked it, and then started from my bedroom in August 2014 when I was 27.
And so where do you think the courage to start your own business came from?
Yeah, I've always been an upstart and I've always done things my own way. You know, from the beauty of Oxford in particular was from the age of 8, we were out cycling all over the place. And my mum would not know if I was coming back or not. All I had was be back by the time it's dark. And usually you were. And there was a great sense of adventure that came with that. And I think when you're out and meeting people and getting into trouble and testing things out and pushing the boundaries, it gives you a real confidence. And then at the age of 12, when I was earning money, just in a little brown envelope from the corner shop on a Saturday and Sunday, I was getting up at 4 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday every single weekend. So I was doing school Monday to Friday. This is at the age of 12. And then 4 a.m. starts on Saturday and Sunday. It just gave you a great tenacity and you were interacting with people and you understood money. And like I said, going on like the boot sales and selling things and all that stuff, it just gave me this inner confidence that I thought I could do it better. I think entrepreneurship is about having an inner belief that you can do things better than other people can. You could call that ego. You could call that many different things. But yeah, for me, it was just about I knew I could do it. And I knew that very, very early. And I go back to my mum and dad, who I hold dear, but I didn't want the career that they had. I wanted to create something different for myself. I think running a business was probably the only way I was going to do that because I just couldn't listen to anybody else. And I was really good at when people told me what to do, I just agreed with them, but then I didn't do it. And there's only so many times you can do that before people then start understanding that, yes, you're not listening to what they're saying. So entrepreneurship was the only way for me.
So how did you, in the first couple of months, go from 0 to 1?
Yes. Well, I can tell you in the first couple of days, it was that specific. So the 8th of August, 2014, it was a sunny day. The very first day, so I'd quit my job. My notice period had come to an end. I bought a laptop. So it was like a £1,000 laptop.
All the essentials.
Yeah, literally, that's all I had. This is absolutely true. 10 a.m. in the morning, my wife had gone to work. I was just in this little cottage in Merton in Oxfordshire where I banged my head every time I went through the doorway. It was just me and a laptop. And I mean, that was it. So I didn't have anything else. I didn't have the website. I didn't have any funding, any clients, any friends, any contacts or anything like that. What I did have was 6 years of building a personal brand within the sector, of winning awards, writing articles, networking, like 3-4 nights a week networking on someone else's time. So people knew who I was and I had a bit of a brand around me. It was early personal brand before we called it personal brand, really. So on the first day, I'd been going around and telling the customers that I used to work with when I was in the small business that I was starting up. And I sort of had this concept that if I didn't take anything too big, probably I could poke the beast a little bit and not get into too much trouble. It turns out I got into way more trouble than I thought I was going to, but that's part of being an upstart and doing these things. So literally day one, I made a phone call to a guy called Jeff who ran a Bulgari hotel in Knightsbridge. Absolutely beautiful building from a property services perspective, some of the most modern equipment in Europe. So it's absolutely stunning. £15,000 a night to stay in their suite. So like we had the most famous people in the world staying there. Called Jeff. He was my banker. I thought, Jeff, I'm going to call you. You're going to say yes. I called him. He said, Andrew, I love the concept of what you're talking about, but I've just taken 4 weeks off to do my kitchen, so you'll have to call me back in 4 weeks. And he put the phone down. Cool. That afternoon, I'd worked with a guy called Mark, who was the property director of a big American business, and he just left. Now, he'd heard that I'd started up because I'd been telling everybody, and he introduced me that afternoon to the finance director of that organization. And they said, look, we really need some help. Mark is going immediately, and we have no one to run the property services here. I said, well, look, I'll do it on a day rate just to start off with, just to get me back into London. So I literally got dressed. I was still in my pants whilst having that conversation. I hadn't even showered. And I went into London on that very first afternoon. Just so happened that those conversations happened on that afternoon. And then we have earned money ever since that point. But it came down to two things.
Running a business shouldn't feel like you're chasing after it. But receipts are everywhere. Invoices get lost and your inbox never stops. Meet Dext, the all-in-one bookkeeping automation platform that puts your financial data right where it needs to be so you can finally build bigger things. Go to dext.com to find out more.
I was really well networked before I started. So yes, it's this wonderful idea that you just start a business from your bedroom, which I did, but I'd had 6 years of hard work to make sure that we were going to have something to begin with. And then there were relationships I could go back to and I could try and go with people like Jeff and then people like Mark who were helping me to get in. But that was just lucky that happened on the day. And yes, that literally then Jeff did come back after 3 or 4 weeks and we did have the conversation and Bulgari became my first customer in terms of what we were delivering property services wise. And then that was my one that I was then able to grow off the back of. And it was such an amazing name to begin with.
Yeah, of course.
And everyone wanted to come for coffee at Bulgari. So it was great.
Yeah, such a selling point as well.
Yes.
Oh, just meet me at the Bulgari hotel.
Yeah, exactly. And also what was great about Bulgari, it was -6 levels down into the ground. So, and like the swimming pool was on like level -5 or something. But there was a cigar testing room also down at the bottom as well. And this was when you couldn't smoke indoors. It recently come in. So for anyone that smoked, they were able to go to the cigar testing room that had exceptionally good extraction and people would have cigars down there. I suspect they still do today, but there were really cool benefits in there. And look, it's no secret, we had the most famous people in the world in there and they had very, very high expectations around what it would be like. And we often had people from all sorts of different countries that would hire an entire floor out. They had that level of money that there'd be one princess staying and she would have the entire floor to herself. And there'd be 2 guys with guns on each door to make sure that no one went onto that floor. And that was the reality of what it was like in there. But the standards were as high as you could imagine. And so for me, that was great because I was all about trying to create this real like business that was going to deliver the highest level of standards for the organization. And it was a great place to start.
Stunning. But on the other side, What were some of your biggest challenges?
Well, the biggest challenge when you begin, I remember calling up Screwfix because I needed to buy tools for the engineer. And I was saying, hey, can you give me some credit? And they're like, no, you're like 5 minutes old. We're not giving you any credit. I was like, yeah, but I'm going to run this great business and like you need to pay us in advance and all that sort of stuff. So don't take for granted that you're just going to have credit from the very beginning, because you have to earn it and it takes some time to get your credit rating up.
Yeah.
The other challenge is when you're tiny, a lot of people just won't give you a chance because you're too much of a risk. So in our sector, there's £100 billion of services that are delivered every year. But it's really easy to give the big companies those services because no procurement person is going to lose their job by giving it to a massive company in the sector. You need some special people that say, do you know what? I believe in what you're doing is different and I'm going to give you an opportunity. But even when we were like 20 million turnover, people still said we were too small. And you just have to sort of really get used to this idea that people are going to say you're too small and that's just it. And that's actually their hang up rather than yours. So yeah, challenge, how do you get credit for things? How do you convince customers that you're the right one for them? And then I guess really the other one is people. So you are expecting people to leave great jobs in great organizations with severance packages and like redundancy terms and great benefits and everything and say, hey, I've just started this little thing over here. Do you want to come and join me? I'll take you for a burger and then we'll try and do it, which was absolutely my style. And you had to really work harder to find people. As the business gets bigger, fine, people apply and you'll have like 1,000 applicants for a role, not a problem. But in those first sort of 4 or 5 months getting into the first couple of years, the biggest sales you actually do is convincing people to leave good jobs to come and work for you. And you do believe it's going to work, but you need to convince them that they think it's going to work. Luckily, it all worked out. But I guess there'll be many people listening that have gone to join startups that haven't worked out very well.
Yeah.
And that can be a bad experience for people as well.
Definitely. But how did you realize it was time to start hiring people?
Yes, probably when I was working 120 hours a week and going round to my mum's on a Saturday and falling asleep on the floor. I think there's this real sort of like warmth when you go back to whether it's your parents or whoever, and you just sort of relax for 5 minutes. And I just lay on the floor and fall asleep, not even a pillow or anything. And the dog would come and lick you in the ears and all that sort of stuff as you were down there. 2 things were happening. We were growing really quickly. So like year 1, from that bedroom, we sold like £700,000 of services in year 1. Year 2, it was 3.5 million. Year 3, it was 6. Year 4, it was 9. Year 5, it was 14. So like we were just growing really, really quickly. And you soon start to realize there's only so much one person can do. This isn't good advice, but I was a real micromanager for a very long time. Nothing happened unless I said it could happen. I was always online. I used WhatsApp all the time. And I would just have the highest expectations. And I would never miss a call. And I'd always prioritize what was going on with work. And I would literally work every hour that was available, as well as doing the networking, as well as writing the articles, as well as doing the awards and everything that goes with it. So it probably took me until we got to maybe 20 million, 30 million, that I thought, actually, Andrew, you need to just take a step back and let other people have a go. And would you believe it? As soon as we invested about £1 million into our overhead, we then grew from 18 million to 32 million in 1 year, and 42 million the year after, and 50 million the year after that. It's really easy advice to give, but for anyone who owns their own business and runs it themselves, it's very difficult to start to extract yourself from the day to day, because you may trust people, but they're never going to do it as well as you will. And any basic mistakes that happen, you're sort of banging your head on the table going, I wouldn't have made that mistake. Yeah. Truth is, you probably would have done. And you need to allow other people to make those mistakes so they can be better as well. So yeah, it took me too long to learn that. I knew I needed help, but I wasn't willing to get out of my own way until I was ready to say it was time to do so. But yeah, when we invested that £1 million in overhead on an £18 million business, it just absolutely flew from that point. That was a really important and value creating time for us as an organization.
And how did you balance like your relationship and friendships with working that much? Because I know in my own business, I struggle with that whole balance, and my friends and my mum will go, Grace, maybe you just like take a chill pill, or I'm having to cancel things with friends and then they might get annoyed, and it's balancing the whole thing. So how did you go around it, and what advice would you give to other people?
If I'm totally honest with you, I didn't balance. And God, there's so much to unpack with all this. Number one, I believe at times in entrepreneurship, you have to be unbalanced in favor of the business because the business needs you. When you start a business, you have to be comfortable with sacrifice and understanding what is it that you're going to sacrifice. So the easiest no for me was my friends. And because I was in Oxfordshire, they were in London by that point. So when they'd call me and say, Hulbert, come out on Friday, let's do this. I'm like, guys, I just can't. Firstly, I can't get to London tonight anyway. I can't be drunk and be hungover tomorrow because I'm really important with what I'm doing. My wife is giving me so much jip because I haven't been there. And actually, she's right. My wife is challenging me saying, Andrew, come and do this. And I'm saying, I'm actually going to prioritize the business over our marriage today. There's only so many times you can do that before a relationship breaks down. And I don't pretend that that whole thing was easy, because there were times in which I was incredibly selfish in relation to the business. What I really tried to focus on was my family and my wife. They were the two things. I didn't always get it right, but my friends were the easiest ones just to say, I'll see you soon. Now, the wonderful thing with boys is they don't really care. And when we get to the end of the story, the last couple of years I've been rebuilding my relationships, which has been absolutely wonderful. But when I called my boy mates up and said, hey, I'm back, they're like, we didn't even know you'd gone anywhere, Hulbert. You know, like it's absolutely fine. I found real solace in my family because I felt like I could be very honest with them. You know what it's like when you're an entrepreneur, there's certain stories you can tell and certain stories you can't. And when you're around people that you can't be fully honest with, that can be a very tiring thing to do. And you're always on and it's a performance and you never really allow your full self to be out there. That's certainly how I did it and how I felt. So when I was with my wife and my mum and my dad, I was able to just be myself. And that's probably why I'd fall asleep on the floor around at their house on a Saturday, because finally you could relax. But Sunday, be straight back up, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd be there doing invoicing. And you're like this as a finance podcast. The first time I paid all the invoices myself through Xero, which was a terrible idea. Xero was great as a package, but the system I had was rubbish. I forgot to pay VAT. So I paid all these invoices and they all came back and said, you missed 20% off. And I had to go back and do it all.
At least they told you.
Well, yes, I think they wanted the money most likely to come back. And I used to do this thing for the finance people out there. In our finance system, what used to happen was you'd upload the invoices and the bank would connect the invoice with the transaction. If I couldn't find the right transaction, I'd just force it through. And basically what that meant was you were double accounting for cost. And the first time I had a finance director, Bill, come in, he said, Andrew, what's all these things called spend money is what it was, called spend money. I was like, Bill, I have no idea. I think that's probably where I was trying to connect the two things up. He's like, you've double accounted on all these costs. He's like, I'm going to hit this button and we're going to add 300K back to the bottom line. And it literally just went, bosh, 300K profit back on the bottom line in that year. I think it was at year 2. And I was like, Bill, you should have told me that you wanted 10% of any saving that you could make. So actually, like, really good financial advice is get a decent financial advisor from the very beginning, or a fractional CFO, or someone who actually knows what they're doing. Because I made some basic amateur errors, which could have avoided a lot of hassle and a lot of cost, and potentially missed profitability from our side, and trying to undo all of the mistakes that I'd made. So yeah, I know you're a finance person, but I mean, I wholeheartedly buy into, from the very beginning, finance is one of the most important things you can do. And absolutely at the end, finance is the value driver to actually make sure you get the best return at exit. And that is one of the most important things.
No, completely agree. We speak to obviously so many clients on a daily basis, and it's actually like for them to understand the value of having a finance person in and with you, and like almost as a financial partner, like someone you can speak to on a regular basis. So like all of our clients, they have my phone number. They WhatsApp me, voice note me, send me scary letters from HMRC.
Yes.
And so everything is figured out together, and like I couldn't do what they do and they can't do what I do. And that's why it's a partnership.
Yeah, and also I think from what I've seen in my short career, you're bringing a modern version of what accountancy and finance can be. My accountant is still some random farmer's accountant in Chipping Norton that adds almost no value whatsoever. Mark, if you're watching, no offense. But actually, they don't really give me anything more than, hey, I've done your tax return for you and this is what it's going to be. There's no like financial planning. My wealth management now is through Barclays, and they offer a whole host of various different services that come with that. When I look at, and I've met a couple of your clients now as we've been interacting, you can see the type of person that you're interacting with. You're that warm person that can actually give good advice, and you're not some scary person sat in Chipping Norton just waiting to see how many cows you've sold that year or whatever. And I think like entrepreneurs, as I needed at the very beginning, the ability to WhatsApp someone and say, hey, HMRC have just said this. I actually have no idea what this means. I don't even understand the language, which I've been there. To, hey, just sort of take a photo of it and say, what do you think? And you just come back and go, lol, like this is going to be okay. There's something really magical in that. And I can see why that would be successful for a small business.
Yeah, no, it's definitely just wanted to create a culture where there's no such thing as a stupid question. But in your company, what kind of culture did you want to build? Because obviously you were in a big company where you felt like you couldn't make decisions and potentially were undervalued. So how did you go around creating a culture that you knew people wanted to stay and grow in?
Running a firm shouldn't feel like you're chasing after it, but clients' receipts are everywhere. Their invoices get lost, your inbox never stops. Meet Dext, the all-in-one bookkeeping automation platform that helps you make sense of financial data so you can react in real time, so you can finally build bigger things. Go to dext.com for more information.
Culture is such an interesting one. And My views on culture have grown quite a lot recently. I actually don't care what your culture is. Just choose what your culture is and make consistent decisions on that culture. If you have a horrible culture where everyone's scared to work there and you're going to fire people at the drop of the hat, that's cool, but that's your culture. Just
you do you.
Yeah, you do you. Be consistent with that. And as long when you interview people, make sure they know it's a horrible place to work. But that's okay. Look, there are many successful businesses out there that have terrible cultures. That's just a consistent thing. My upbringing, my working class background, my very, very diverse group of friends as I grew up from all sorts of different backgrounds. My working class family, my mum and dad on low pay. What I saw is my whole family, they weren't treated badly, but they weren't treated almost with like the superstars that they were. My mum and dad were, if they were sick, they went to work. You know, if they got asked to stay late, they stayed late. If they didn't get paid overtime, they didn't get paid overtime. They did whatever it was best for the organization. I wanted to go into this sector where there were going to be a lot of people on salaries that ranged between, say, 30 and 40K. So not absolute minimum wage, but mid-range salaries. And I wanted to treat them really well. And that's what the culture was. Now, when I started, I didn't realize it was this thing called ESG, so environmental social governance, or equity, diversity, and inclusion, depending on which route you go down. We tried and were successful from the very beginning to build a culture where everybody was welcome. And in fact, we very nicely described the senior leadership team of Pareto, including myself, as the home of the broken. So if you had in some way been done over by somebody at some point and you had a protected characteristic of any kind, you were welcome in our senior team. And that could be any type of diversity that you could see or not see. And I just absolutely love that team of 15 people that we had. What was really important to me was anybody in the organization, if they had anything they were insecure about, they could look up at the very top of the organization and that insecurity was in one of the leaders. And there was no glass ceiling to get there. So it didn't matter if you were whatever, you could actually get to that point. And I really had this chip on my shoulder. I still do. A lot of organizations say that they're great businesses and they support all these different things, blah, blah, blah. And in reality, they change their flag to a rainbow in June and they do something for Black History Month in October. But outside of that, they're not really doing anything real. I wanted to be able to cut us in half and it was very genuine. And so the culture was all about being great, being respectful, being open, being inclusive. And I had a big chip on my shoulder with the sector. So in the sector we're in, 85% of our membership are white men. Now, that's just a fact of the sector. So if I could then build a leadership team that looked very different to that, which we did, we had 50-50 representation on men and women. We had great representation across all different other aspects as well. It meant when we went into sales pitches, it was real. And we didn't just bring someone in because they were diverse in some way. They were part of our team. And they were there on their own merit, not on any other reason. Sounds really basic, but that was our culture. And when you're selling to these big tech businesses, and you know, big clients for us in the end were the likes of Twitter, Deliveroo, ASOS, Netflix, Facebook, those sort of organizations. I didn't go in to sell them, hey, we're the best property services business, or we're going to maintain your lights the best. We said, hey, look at this team that we've got. We're doing something different in this sector. I bet we don't look like the other 5 companies you're going to see today. And if you like our vibe, if you like the cut of our jib in terms of what's happening here, then come and support us. Like, come on this journey with us. And yes, by the way, I am this sort of slightly over the top gregarious character that's working it out as I go along and making it all up. But we can have fun doing this together. And we do skydives every year and we spend 25 grand a year on donuts and we make our own honey and we do all this stuff. Like, we plant our own forest, etc. Come and be part of that with us. And for the right customers in the right environment, they absolutely were on board. It doesn't work with every customer. And good sales is about finding the culture that I was just describing. The culture you have, find the customers that want to buy that culture. That is not every customer out there. In our sector, it's £100 billion a year. So we knew that we only needed to carve out like a £50 million market for us to have our own niche. We just happened to go for the biggest names that we could find. And honestly, on the weekend, I'd sit there on my phone and go, right, what apps have I got on my phone? Let's contact them. Let's contact them. Let's contact them. And as soon as you get like, Twitter was like our 4th or 5th customer back in 2016 when Twitter was an amazing place to be, an amazing organization. Different today in terms of how they're run. Twitter was like a 24 grand a year contract for us, but we could sell it like it was £1 million a year contract. And you could use those stories and like the cultural piece that went with it, everything just fit. It just worked so well for us. So on culture, we were a great, inclusive, proper business. You don't have to be like that. Because I wanted to be like that because of my background, but also I knew it made good sales sense when I was selling. You can have whatever culture you like. You just need to find organizations that want to buy what you sell. Yeah, depending on how wide your culture is will depend on who you can sell that to. But for us, it was about finding the right ones.
Yeah, 100%. And we've talked a lot about big numbers and all those good things. But what do you think were some of your biggest mistakes that you've learned along the way?
Oh man, I've got some real big ones. I can tell you. I'll give you a real example, which is also a big number. I think it was 22, 23. And there must have been maybe 21, 22. We trusted a new client. And they were a charity that was set up, and we were aware of the guy that set it up, and he took a big building on the South Bank and he filled it with artists, and so they were all showing their work. Amazing idea, and it was in line with our culture of trying to support charities and do it. He raised £2.5 million of debt, and then one day we went to the building and he was all gone, and everything was gone. And we lost £380,000 in one afternoon. And that was it, just written off, bad debt, no way of getting the money back. There were no assets, everything was just leased. Yeah, we took a chance on somebody, ran up a big debt with them. Luckily, it was only 380k, could have been a lot worse. And it was just gone like that. Now, we learned a really valuable lesson very quickly in that one, which is, yes, we have this brilliant culture and we're very inclusive and we want to support organizations like that, but do a bloody credit check first and sort of see what's going on. Or at least if you have done a credit check and it comes back zero, which it would have done in this case, make sure you have advance payment terms or make sure you're not taking on. It became a real thing one day when he came to us and goes, oh, there's £1 million internet contract that needs to be done. Can you sign it and you could mark it up by 15% or whatever it was? The team actually came to me and said this was a good idea. And I said, this is the biggest alarm bell I've actually seen. This was just before it went pop. So yeah, that was very real. And we're still bruised from that. And again, anyone who knows in finance, that just hits your P&L. That debt write-off, nowhere to hide that. And actually, that was hard to explain to the investors who had only recently invested that we just lost 380k of their money or our money or whatever. That was pretty bad. I think also just going back to what I said in terms of other lessons, it took me too long to bring other people in. There's a real fine balance, and you'll find this as your business continues to grow. When are you making enough profit to have more people involved that isn't going to take you down too much? You've obviously got your cash flow situation to consider as well. And everyone sort of loves this idea of exceptionalizing as much cost as possible, which you can do in project work, but it just eats at your cash. And obviously cash in small businesses is so important with what they do. So we probably waited too long. And although my journey was, say, 9 years that we went through from 0 to 50 million turnover, we probably could have got there quicker had I have made a decision to bring people in earlier. So say I brought people in year 7 or so. If we'd have done that in year 4, then maybe that would have been the right time. You never know because business is business, but that would be a really important learning. If I ever did a business again, which I'm not going to, just mark my words, I would bring resource to do stuff earlier. And even when we were, say we had nearly 550 staff when I exited, still didn't have a PA, still didn't have anyone helping me at all. I still did everything myself because I didn't want this idea of anyone making a mistake that was so obvious that then would lead to us not winning a customer.
Yeah.
See this mentality of sort of always wanting to keep control and being a total control freak, which isn't a good trait, by the way, not for people that work for you. But yeah, even right until that end point, I couldn't relinquish all of my control. And I understand that about myself and I just have to deal with that. I'm still working on it on a day-to-day basis now.
But I feel like a lot of founders have it purely because you've grown this business from the ground up. And it's I explained it to my mum, it's the business is my baby and I'm such a control freak because I've birthed it and I care so deeply about it. And I know that none of my employees care as much as me, and that's absolutely fine, but I care so deeply. And I always make sure that I hire people that know more than me. Mm-hmm. Always. Okay. So everyone is cleverer than me.
You found enough people to do that?
Yeah, so far all good, which is positive.
Yeah.
Which leads me on to my next question. So how did you know that it was the right time to exit and that's something that you wanted to do?
I had been running at 1,000 miles an hour for 9 years or so. And we'd had 2 kids by that stage as well. So my kids, I think, were 2 and 4 at the time. And with my daughter, who was born first, I just wasn't there. It started to weigh on my mind. We really tried hard to have kids. It took us some time. We had a rocky journey to get there. So when Florence was born, it was just magic. But I wasn't there to appreciate the magic. And then a lockdown came. So then all of a sudden, we were in lockdown and I was at home 95% of the time as opposed to being out. And then we had our son, Luca. And I just realized very quickly that the time I'd spent with Luca in lockdown was so special. And that's what I'd missed with my daughter and when I was running around. So it changed me that stage. Now, when Florence was born, I'd come home at 6:45 at night. I'd give her a bath for 10 minutes, pass her back to my wife, and my wife would do everything else. I honestly thought I was a good father at that stage. I'm very fortunate now, being out of work, that I'm able to appreciate that wasn't the case. And the relationships I have now are much better. So COVID really biologically changed something in me that I wanted to not miss out on being with the kids, especially as we'd fought very very hard to have them and everything that went with it. We knew that we were growing very quickly, and we got to sort of this £42 million turnover situation, and we'd grown from 18 to 42 in like 2 years. So it'd been a real quick growth curve. And you sort of just start having conversations between everybody. You're like, are you ready to go? Like, yeah, maybe I'm ready to go. Are you ready to go? What sort of return do you want? How does this work? Should we speak to some corporate advisors? Should we do this? Should we do that? And everyone sort of dances around the subject for some time. And all entrepreneurs are different. And some may say, right, one day I want to make 10 million. Some might say I want to make 100 million. Money is an individual success factor to each of us. We were sort of having a look around and having a chat, and we said, okay, we will appoint a corporate advisor, but we're not really on the market. We'll just appoint them and we'll see what happens.
Just dipping your toe in the pot.
Yeah, we're just showing a little bit of ankle at this stage. See if anybody is going to come and ask us to dance. And so, yeah, we did that. And of course, as soon as you appoint corporate advisors, you are technically on the market, although you're saying that you're not, and they start having conversations because, of course, their ratchet is linked to how much they can make by selling your business. So they just started having some quiet conversations, and actually the market was interested, and very quickly there was offers. And in my time, I've had probably 12 private equity offers for investment and 3 from trade sale, and they're real offers written down, and those offers have ranged from all sorts of stuff. But we raised about $100 million in total from those exits. We got to a point where we had an offer on the table that was very strong and that everybody was comfortable with, and the investors that we had at the time were really happy with, because it meant they made a 420% return in about 2.5 years. So they were very happy. We'll surprise nobody. That's a case study on their website now if you want to go and have a look at it. Yeah, it was the right time. But I made it very clear that I was not going to be part of the journey post this investment deal. So when I go back and say we hired a load of people to run the business, it included a new CEO. And again, for any founder who has got to a point where they're able to take a step back and put a new CEO in place, that's a whole different type of stress now, because there's somebody who is not you, who you need to enable them to run the business, and you need to stay out of the way. And when all the team keep contacting you because they don't want to go to the new CEO, you need to say, sorry guys, you need to go back to that CEO. It's not me any longer. And I got into trouble a few times because the team would text me, oh, WhatsApp me, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, let's do this, this, and this. But it wasn't my decision to make anymore. And this really good advice to people: just when you're choosing your CEO, choose the right one. Take a little bit longer to find the right one. And the entrepreneur and founder needs to be at peace that this is the person that's going to take them forward. For us, it worked very successfully, and we worked hard to find the right person. So really, when we were out there and we had this offer and it was a good value and everybody was willing to go and the investors were happy that I would take a step back, it all worked. And we did the deal in about 3.5 weeks.
Stunning.
Yes, it was very, very intense. For anybody who's done deals that are approaching 9 figures, there's an awful lot of due diligence that has to be completed. And I go back to what we said around great finance. The finance director and the finance team at the end, that is where you either detract or create value, because you have Deloitte, PwC, Ernst & Young all over your finances, pulling everything apart that they possibly can do in a 3.5 week window. I remember the due diligence we did had 850 questions. And I remember reading them. It wasn't just finance, it was IT and ESG and all sorts of stuff. I remember reading them going, I don't even know what this means. And actually, I'm a very successful entrepreneur now. I actually have no idea what this means. And luckily, ChatGPT is a great thing. No, luckily, the finance team and the corporate advisors, dealt with it incredibly well. And yeah, we got the deal done. There, we had the day where we had a photographer there, and all of the money landed in the accounts. And there was literally tens of millions bouncing around in people's accounts on that day. It was a magical day. And I think it was 23rd of November, 2023. We'd achieved. And probably for the first time, I thought all this hard work might have been worth it, because until that stage, I hadn't really enabled myself to step back and say we've done enough.
Appreciate what you've done, yeah.
It's always more.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
What is your purpose now of trying to share your story with other people?
So I've been decompressing for the last 2 years, and I really had to decompress because I was so highly strung. And I'd worked with a business psychologist before I left to prepare me for what the exit was going to be. And do you know what? I've done a few podcasts now. Almost exclusively, what people ask me about is how I did not go into depression after I sold the business. It's a very real issue. The research I've done, I think as high as 62% of exiting founders will face depression, which is really important to understand. The guy I worked with taught me that I'd been swimming towards an island and I was going to eventually reach that island. And when I got there, I needed to have a plan for what I was going to do. Many people who sell and make tens of millions, they may just go to the Bahamas and they sit there and they look around and go, oh, phone's not ringing. I don't, and all my mates are at work. So just the other thing, right? If you're a successful millionaire in your late 30s and you're thinking, oh, this is good, and your mates are at work, right? It's not like...
Who can I go to the pub with now?
No, and that's like, honestly, it sounds so silly, but like money doesn't solve many things. Money just gives you options to do other things. The last couple of years, I have just been rebuilding. So with my wife and my family, with my kids, and I mean just doing the mundane stuff, taking them to school, doing their homework, going swimming. I bought a big farm over in Oxford now. So we have a quad bike and we go and pick berries and make jam and make our own sourdough and plant our own carrots and all that wonderful stuff. Real basic stuff that I probably could have done anyway without having all this money, but I just couldn't get out my own way to understand that that's what happiness would look like. I did the stupid stuff, like I went into a car showroom and bought $100,000 McLaren in bright yellow. Felt like a total knobhead, to be honest. I had it for 6 months, sold it, lost 10 grand on it almost immediately as a lesson to myself about not being such an idiot. I do have a number of cars, but they're generally just like random cars rather than like the flashy ones. And then with my 2 sisters and my mum and dad, we bought them all their houses. I gave my dad £250,000 to retire, and then we bought them a new house and then put an extension on it. And basically we were able just to secure all of my family. And I had this concept that, not in a morbid way, but if I died, everyone would be okay. Everyone I love and care about, and my kids have got a couple of houses each. My wife has got the big house. My mum and dad and my sisters, everyone's okay. And that makes me feel really good. And actually, I feel almost no level of guilt about my wealth because I'm able to make sure everybody else was looked after. The other thing we did at the exit was we had a sweet equity pot for the team. And the sweet equity pot was worth 8 figures in the end. So even though I made a decent chunk of money, there was also a lot of wealth that was shared out amongst other people too. And yeah, really, the last couple of years, I went back to my mates, as I said, and I said, hey, I'm back again. And they're like, cool. And now I organise holidays for us to go on because they're all busy. So like I go back to Barcelona where there were 25 of us. Now, there may only be 6 of us now that go on these holidays. But in October, we went to Napoli, got on a train, went to Rome, had a couple of beers on the train. It was magic. Yeah, it's just like none of us had ever been away. Like the last 15 years hadn't happened. It was just like we were all together. I found very genuine joy and like love and warmth in all of that. And yes, money's enabled me to do that. But the biggest piece of advice I can give, money doesn't emotionally change you. Money doesn't make your relationships with your partner or your kids any better, or your friends or your parents or whatever. Money just gives you time to be able to do it. How you use that time is the most important thing. And I absolutely mean this, whether people believe me or not. I love nothing more now than not having an alarm clock. Like I used to sleep 4 hours a night, right? For like 9 years.
Ew, gross.
Yeah, bad. Now I sleep 9 hours. Okay. So I have no alarm clock. My daughter comes in about 7 o'clock. She'll give me a cuddle for 20 minutes. My son will come in and then start jumping on us and we'll all wrestle together and then we'll have breakfast and go to school. I promise you that feeling of wanting to be there, not thinking about work, not thinking about your phone, not thinking about the next sale, that is true wealth. And I really mean it. And yes, money's enabled me to be in that situation, but I'm not chasing the next car or the next holiday or anything. I'm just chasing time, which is very precious. And like you feel that love in that moment. And I should have been able to do that without starting a business for 10 years and running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But I needed to get the chip off my shoulder. That's what I needed to do. And now I just feel so grateful. And one of the things I've had in the opposite of depression, I've had overwhelming feelings of gratitude. I travel a little bit. So I'll be in like, I don't know, Bratislava or something, which I was. And I'd be just like, what on earth am I doing on the UFO deck in Bratislava on a Tuesday afternoon, right? There's something really magical about that. And, you know, eating a hot dog or whatever was going on. So like, I've just found joy in having time and being with people that I love and reconnecting with friends and actually talking about all sorts of various different things. Yes, I have a nice big house and a nice load of land and I have my own forest and my own nature reserve and all those things now. But actually, all of that is irrelevant. It's about the time. And that's what decompression has been like for me. And I'm 39 now. I don't know what the next 40 years looks like. I'm actually in no rush to work that out. I'm sort of in this stage where I will be around as long as my kids want me to be there. I'm very aware my 6-year-old daughter isn't going to think I'm cool for the rest of her life, although I have taught her how to drive the quad bike, the 300cc quad bike already. And yeah, I'm in no rush. I'm trying to work it out. What I am trying to do for free is say, look, I'm very open. Here's the story. There's no secrets to anything that we did. Come and ask me. Let me teach you. I also get to meet amazing people like you who have done it much earlier than I have. And you're going through all those stresses and talking about your mum and being tired and like not having enough sleep and all those things as well. But there's so many learnings that people can take. I actually believe with the right mindset, most people could run a 6-figure business. They just have to take the chance to create that opportunity. But it's just understanding what that opportunity is, what your market is, and not bloody like creating a TikTok that you think is going to save your life because it's going to make you loads of money. Yes, you need to do all the marketing and the social media stuff that comes with it, but what's your actual thing that people are going to pay you money for? You can go and dream you're going to be Mr. Beast or Simon Squibb one day or something like that, but actually go out and have something that people are going to pay you money for, and then do all the nice social media that goes with it.
Yeah, of course. And the last question is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to a founder just starting out?
I'm going to swear for this one. It's, my business studies teacher told me this when I was 14, and it always stuck with me. Mr. Bray, Vernon Bray, don't let the bastards grind you down.
Always.
You will face adversity. You will face times when people tell you you can't do it. They will impart their own insecurities onto you. Oh, I could never run my own business. This, and this. Fuck them. Fuck them. Literally, you do it yourself. It's all about what's happening in here, how you are fighting, and just don't let them grind you down. If you believe it and you have the right growth mindset for it, just go and do it. Because actually, if you can do that in your 20s is the time to fail. You're 29 with a failed business. Who cares? Go back and get a job. You're going to get a 50K, 100K job. It's going to be no problem, because maybe when you get into your 30s, it's maybe a bit more tricky, because maybe you're thinking about getting married or having kids or having a career. And then probably into your 40s, you've now got all these commitments that you can't take a step out because you've got a mortgage and a dog and all this sort of stuff. And then maybe in your 50s, you can start again. But in your 20s, just go and have a go. Who cares? And actually, if it all goes wrong, you've just got that safety net of going back to wherever you started. But yeah, don't let the bastards grind you down, because they will. And you're better than that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.